from as far east from the Turkey ridges of the Alleghanies. Down from Minnesota, 2,500 miles, the Mississippi River runs to the Gulf, carrying every drop of water that flows down two-thirds the continent, carrying every brook and rill, rivulet and creek, carrying all the rivers that run down two-thirds the continent. The Mississippi runs to the Gulf of Mexico. Down the Yellowstone, the Milk, the White, and Cheyenne, the Cannonball, the Mussel Shell, the James, and the Sioux, down the Judith, the Grand, the Ocean, the Platte, the Skunk, the Salt, the Black, in Minnesota, down the Rock, the Illinois, and the Kankakee, the Allegheny, the Monongahela, Kanawha, and Muskingum, down the Miami, the Wabash, the Licking, and the Green, the Cumberland, the Kentucky, and the Tennessee, down the Ouachita, the Wichita, the Red, and Yazoo. Down the Missouri, 3,000 miles from the Rockies. Down the Ohio, 1,000 miles from the Alleghenies. Down the Arkansas, 1,500 miles from the Great Divide. Down the Red, 1,000 miles from Texas. Down the Great Valley, 2,500 miles from Minnesota, carrying every rivulet and brook, creek and rill, carrying all the rivers that run down two-thirds the continent. The Mississippi runs to the Gulf. New Orleans to Baton Rouge, Baton Rouge to Natchez, Natchez to Vicksburg, Vicksburg to Memphis, Memphis to Cairo. We built a dike 1,000 miles long. Men and mules, mules and mud. Mules and mud 1,000 miles up the Mississippi. A century before we bought the Great Western River, the Spanish and the French built dikes to keep the Mississippi out of New Orleans at flood stage. In 40 years, we continued to levee the entire length of the great alluvial delta. That mud plain that extends from the Gulf of Mexico clear to the mouth of the Ohio. The ancient valley built up for centuries by the old river spilling her floods across the bottom of the continent. A mud delta of 40,000 square miles. Men and mules, mules and mud. New Orleans to Baton Rouge, Natchez to Vicksburg, Memphis to Cairo, 1,000 miles up the river. And the planters brought their blacks and their plows and their cotton over to the river. Down through the Boone Trace, down through Cumberland Gap, over from Georgia and South Carolina, over from the Tidewater, over from the old cotton land west to the big river, west to the steamboat highway, down the highway to the sea. Down the Missouri, tobacco and whiskey down the Ohio, down from Pittsburgh, down from St. Louis, hemp and potatoes, pork and flour. We sent our commerce to the sea. We made cotton king. We rolled 1 million bales down the river for Liverpool and Leeds. 1860, we rolled 4 million bales down the river. Rolled them off Alabama. Rolled them off Mississippi. Rolled them off Louisiana. Rolled them down the river. We fought a war. We fought a war and kept the west bank of the river free of slavery forever. But we left the Old South impoverished and stricken. Doubly stricken. Because besides the tragedy of war, already the frenzied cotton cultivation of a quarter of a century had taken toll of the land. We mined the soil for cotton until it would yield no more, and then moved west. We fought a war, but there was a double tragedy. The tragedy of land twice impoverished. Black spruce and Norway pine, Douglas fir and red cedar, scarlet oak and hemlock and aspen. There was lumber in the north. The war impoverished the Old South. The railroads killed the steamboats, but there was lumber in the north. Heads up, lumber on the upper river. Heads up, lumber enough to cover all Europe. Down from Minnesota and Wisconsin, down to St. Paul, down to St. Louis and St. Joe, lumber for the new continent of the West, lumber for the new mill. Lumber in the north and coal in the hills. Iron and coal down the Monongahela. Iron and coal down the Ohio. Down to Pittsburgh, down to Wheeling. Iron and coal for the steel mill. For the railroads driving west and south. For the new cities of the Great Valley. We built new machinery and cleared new land in the West. 10 million bales down to the Gulf. Cotton for the spools of England and France. 15 million bales down to the Gulf. Cotton for the spools of Italy and Germany. built 100 cities and 1,000 towns. St. Paul and Minneapolis, Davenport and Keokuk, Moline and Quincy, Cincinnati and St. Louis, Omaha and Kansas City. Across to the Rockies and down to Minnesota, 2,500 miles to New Orleans. We built a new continent. Black spruce and Norway pine, Douglas fir and red cedar, scarlet oak and shagbark hickory. We built 100 cities and 1,000 towns, but at what a cost? We cut the top off the Allegheny and sent it down the river. We cut the top off Minnesota and sent it down the river. We cut the top off Wisconsin and sent it down the river. We left the mountains and the hills slashed and burned and moved on. For the water comes downhill, spring and fall, down from the cut-over mountains, down from the plowed-off slopes. From as far west as Idaho and as far east as Pennsylvania, down every brook and rill, rivulet and creek, carrying every drop of water that flows down 2/3 the continent. 1903, 1907, 1913, 1916, 1922, 1927, 1936, 1937. Down from Pennsylvania and Ohio, Kentucky and West Virginia, Missouri and Illinois, down from North Carolina and Tennessee, down the Judith, the Grand, the Osage and the Platte, the Rock, the Salt, the Black in Minnesota, down the Monongahela, the Allegheny, Kanawha and Muskingum, the Miami, the Wabash, the Licking and the Green, the White, the Wolf, the Cache and the Black, down the Kaw and Kaskaskia, the Red and Yazoo, down the Cumberland, Kentucky and the Tennessee, down the Ohio 1,000 miles from Pittsburgh, down the Arkansas 1,000 miles from Texas, down to the Mississippi. To Baton Rouge, Baton Rouge to Natchez, Natchez to Vicksburg, Vicksburg to Memphis, Memphis to Cairo. 1,000 miles down the levee, the long vigil starts. 38 feet at Baton Rouge, river rising. Helena, river rising. Memphis, river rising. Cairo, river rising. 1,000 miles to go. 1,000 miles of levee to hold. Coast Guard patrol needed at Paducah. Coast Guard patrol needed at Paducah. 200 boats wanted at Hickman. 200 boats wanted at Hickman. Levee patrol, men to Blytheville. Levee patrol, men to Blytheville. $2,000 men wanted at Cairo. 2,000 men wanted at Cairo. $100,000 men to fight the old river. We sent every branch of the service down the river to help the sleepless engineers fight a battle on a 2,000-mile front. The Army and the Navy, the Coast Guard and the Marine Corps, the CCC and the WPA, the Red Cross and the Health Service fought night and day to hold the old river off the valley. Needed at Louisville, 500 dead, 5,000 ill. Food and water needed at Cincinnati. Food and medicine needed at Lawrenceburg, 35,000 homeless in Evansville. Food and medicine needed in Aurora. Food and medicine and shelter and clothing for 750,000 down in the valley. Last time we held the levee, but the Mississippi claimed her valley. She backed into Tennessee and Arkansas and Illinois and Missouri. She spread her arms over thousands of acres of land, and she left farms ruined, stock drowned, houses torn loose. $1913, 1916, 1922, 1937. We built 100 cities and 1,000 towns, but at what a cost. In 1937, the entire nation sent help to the stricken people of the valley. Congress appropriated millions to aid the flooded cities and villages and to rehabilitate the flood victims. But spring and fall, the water comes down. And for years, the old river has taken a toll from the valley, more serious than ever she does in flood time. Year in, year out, the water comes down. Down from 1,000 hillsides, washing the top off the valley. For 50 years, we dug for cotton and moved west when the land gave out. For 50 years, we plowed for corn and moved on when the land gave out. We planted and plowed with no regard for the future. And 400 million tons of topsoil, 400 million tons of our most valuable natural resource have been washed into the Gulf of Mexico every year. And poor land makes poor people. Poor people make poor land. For a quarter of a century, we have been forcing more and more farmers into tenancy. Today, 40% of all the farmers in the Great Valley, 10% are sharecroppers, down on their knees in the valley. A share of the crop their only security, no home, no land of their own, aimless, footloose, and impoverished. Unable to eat even from the land, because their cash crop is their only livelihood. Credit at the store, their only reserve. And a generation growing up with no new land in the West, no new continent to build. A generation whose people knew King's Mountain and Shiloh. A generation whose people knew Fremont and Custer. But a generation facing a life of dirt and poverty, disease and drudgery. Growing up without proper food, medical care, or schooling. Ill-clad, ill-housed, and ill-fed, and in the greatest river valley in the world. There is no such thing as an ideal river in nature, but the Mississippi River is out of joint. Dust blowing in the west, floods raging in the east. We have seen these problems growing to alarming extremes. When we first found the Great Valley, it was 40% forested. Today, for every 100 acres of forest we found, we have 10 left. Today, 5% of the entire valley is ruined forever for agricultural use. 25% of the topsoil has been shoved by the old river into the Gulf of Mexico. Today, 2 out of 5 farmers in the valley are tenant farmers, 10% of them sharecroppers, living in a state of squalor unknown to the poorest peasant in Europe. And we are forcing 30,000 more into tenancy and cropping every year. Flood control of the Mississippi means control in the Great Delta that must carry all the water brought down from 2/3 of the continent. And control of the delta means control of the little rivers and the great arms running down from the uplands. And the old river can be controlled. We had the power to take the valley apart. We have the power to put it together again. In 1933, we started. Down on the Tennessee River, when Congress created the Tennessee Valley Authority, an authority commissioned to develop navigation, flood control, agriculture, and industry in the valley. A valley that carries more rainfall than any other in the country. The valley through which the Tennessee used to roar down to Paducah in flood time, with more water than any other tributary of the Ohio. First came the dams. Up on the clinch at the head of the river, we built Norris Dam, a great barrier to hold water in flood times and to release water down the river for navigation in low water season. Next came Wheeler, then Guntersville and Pickwick and Chickamauga. A series of great barriers that eventually will transform the old Tennessee into a link of freshwater pools, locked and dammed, regulated and controlled, down 650 miles to Paducah. But you cannot plan for water unless you plan for land, for the cut-over mountains, the eroded hills, the gullied fields that pour their waters unchecked down to the river. The CCC, working with the Forest Service and agricultural experts, have started to put the worn fields and hillsides back together. Black walnut and pine for the worn-out fields and the gullied hillsides. Roots for the cut-over and burned-over hillsides. Roots to hold the water in the ground. Black walnut and pine for the new forest preserve. Soil conservation men have worked out crop systems with the farmers of the valley, crops to conserve and enrich the topsoil, so that today 1 million acres of land in the Tennessee Valley are being tilled scientifically, staying instead of speeding the water off the ground. But you cannot plan for water and land unless you plan for people. Down in the valley, the Farm Security Administration has built a model agricultural community. Living in homes they themselves built, paying for them on long-term rates, the homesteaders will have a chance to share in the wealth of the valley. More important, the Farm Security Administration has loaned thousands of dollars to farmers in the valley. Farmers who were caught by years of depression and in need of only a stake to be self-sufficient. And where there's water, there's power. Where there's water for flood control and water for navigation, there's water for power. Of urban life. Power for the villages and cities and factories. West Virginia and North Carolina, Tennessee and Mississippi. The river works.
There's something about a freight train that talks to the very heart of a boy, and to the boy that lives within a man. A freight train fetches treasures from wonderful places and takes them to other places that must be wonderful too, because they're somewhere else. A boy's first geography lesson is a train, because a train says, "Come with me to New York Central, to Louisville and Nashville, Boston and Maine." One moment, a boy's world is a mixture of Main Street, home, the ballpark, and the schoolhouse. Then the huge engine pulls in. The air is perfumed with diesel smoke, and the big traveling show comes to a stop on the local siding.
It takes an awful long time to stop a freight train. And then the greatest important people in the world get off and have a talk with Mr. Harris. They probably tell him that they can only stay a minute and 27 seconds, and that everything is okay in California and some other places, like Massachusetts.
A freight train drags a string of opportunities to a boy's hometown and asks him to make his choice. Will this boy raise cattle on the western plains? Will he someday be a farmer? There's plenty of land and millions of appetites. Is there a bulldozer in his daydreams? There's a whale of a lot of construction yet to be done in America. Airports and factories, housing and highways. What does a chemical tank car say to this boy? Is chemistry his future?
Ortho, night, Rocco, Oro, benzene. Wow!
This boy doesn't realize that chemistry is involved in every single industry whose products fill this train, and every other freight train in America pounding through on the main track behind it.
Engineers are always in a hurry to get going. And their helpers in the caboose are too. Because they have a lot of other places to go and see. Boy, that's the way to live. I wonder what that word means. But orthonitrate, something or other.
A freight train rolls away, but it always leaves behind it some part of its wonder and mystery, like a strange new word in the mind of a boy. My thoughts just naturally slide back to the 1920s. Seems almost like yesterday. Back in the 20s, boys didn't know anything about jet engines or television, of course. And they sure didn't see many tank cars full of orthonitrochlorobenzene running around. They couldn't have pronounced the stuff either. But one thing sure, they certainly would have been curious about it. just the way they were curious about the things that belonged to their time. The word why was the biggest part of their vocabulary. Why did the blacksmith cook the horseshoe before he hammered on it? If he wanted it hot, why did he dip it in water and cool it off? And if he wanted it cold, why did he put it back in the fire? There wasn't any noticeable labor shortage back in those days either. There was an odd job for every boy. One of the best young chemical engineers I know started out clerking in his dad's grocery store. But he liked chemistry too. He had no way of knowing the chemical industry would someday need both of his talents. It was a golden age for young wizards. Radio was brand new, the miracle of snatching sound right out of the air. Crystal set builders, blacksmith watchers, grocery boys, they're the kids who put the long names on the chemical tank cars you see today, when they got the chance to try. Chemistry in America, even in the days of World War I, was a frontier science. A chemical plant looked about the same as a shirtwaist factory and attracted a lot less attention. The chemist was a pioneer. He worked in crudely equipped laboratories, producing essential compounds known today as the building block chemicals. The sulfa drugs were asleep on a shelf. The magic molds that would someday be called the miracle drugs were not yet under the microscope. But these men were laying the foundation of a great chemical industry in the United States. When the 1930s came along, the boys who carried slingshots in the 20s were old enough for college, still curious about the how and why of things. A lot of them chose chemistry, and they were going to be the dreamers, planners, and managers of a great age. They were finding out from their professors all across the United States what the future held in store for them, how big the dream was.
Chemistry is interested in every aspect of man's world, bounded by the firmament and the thin crust of earth to which he clings. Chemistry is concerned with every basic element of man's survival: the clothing on his back, the food on his table, the roof over his head, and all the many things beneath that roof that enrich his life, increase his comfort, and prolong his stay on earth.
Beyond the campus, the biggest war in history was brewing, and the nation called the brand new bachelors of science to help build the arsenal of democracy. The young chemists delivered. They produced sulfa drugs in quantity, in time to save casualties from becoming fatalities. They put synthetic rubber on war wheels and nylon in parachute packs. They put plastics where critically scarce metal used to be. And finally, they were asked to share leadership in the greatest scientific project in 1940-odd years. The project that made the world stand still and count. 0 minus 15 seconds. 0 minus 10 seconds. 0 minus 5 seconds.
When the war ended, the world fell back exhausted, stunned by the violence, but stirring with life, as the sea after a storm. For the young chemists, it was their first opportunity to follow the true purposes of their science, to protect life, improve life, and prolong it. At last, they could work in peace. The nation's industrial skyline parted in the middle to make room for the growing chemical industry. The kids who whooped and hollered at freight trains in the 1920s were now expanding this new industry in plants that no longer resembled warehouses. Now they looked like battleships anchored in concrete. The chemical engineers wrote their shorthand notes in steel against the sky. The writing looked complicated, but the message was clear. From now on, man could look to chemistry to release him from his dependence on fortunate circumstances. The chemists had learned to duplicate natural resources, to extend them, to preserve them where possible, and replace them when necessary.
Most of our achievements begin in the research laboratory. Research is our gamble that we can do something first, or do it better and more economically than it's ever been done before. Sometimes we know before we start what the results will be. But research can be full of surprises. For example, my division of the company assigned a research group to find a special fluid that could be combined with a plastic base to make better shower curtains. The group discussed some possible starting points, and the search began. 2,000 miles from the chemistry lab, a seemingly unrelated research job was in the air. An outstanding aircraft manufacturer was trying to add a new measure of safety to his already reliable airliners. He was searching for a new fluid to put in the main hydraulic systems and the cabin superchargers of his big passenger planes. He specifically wanted a fluid that was fire resistant. In the test lab, his technicians were firing tracer bullets into existing fluids and starting fires. They were dropping all known hydraulic fluids on hot metal manifolds and starting fires. They were forcing these fluids through nozzles and putting an acetylene torch to the spray and starting fires. Fire was what they didn't want, but they were getting it. Back in the chemistry lab, nobody was thinking of hydraulic fluids for airplanes. The men of the research team kept on looking for a new shower curtain material. Their methods would have seemed unreal to those who liked the weird fiction approach to science, No mad geniuses here, staring at the wall with burning eyes. Just normal men, talking, asking, and answering. They stimulated the best of each other's thinking. This kind of product application research is something like looking for four-leaf clovers. First, you have to find a place where clover grows. And after that, you're on your own. If an experiment doesn't go as well as you want it to, you keep on trying. That's what these men did. They kept at it. And one day, they made it happen. A few days later, samples of the new material, now in powder form, were tested on the laboratory scale rolling machines. What came out was a thin sheet of tough plastic, just right for shower curtains. The new plastic passed the standard test with ease. When it came to the flame test, we knew we had hit on something. 4 strips of plastic from the same general chemical family were put to the torch. Three of them burned under intense heat and were promptly discarded from the test. But the new plastic resisted fire. This fact was duly noted on the progress report. And when the airplane manufacturer asked the chemical company to help find a fire-resistant fluid for his airliners, we had the answer ready. The liquid, intended only for the shower curtain plastic, was given the fire test in the lab of the plane maker. It not only resisted fire, it snuffed out the flaming torch. The chemists built lubricating qualities into the fluid until it extended the life of moving aircraft parts 10 times over. They called it Skydrol hydraulic fluid, and it has flown millions of miles around the world without failure, contributing to the safety and peace of mind of every man who travels the high highway.
Memorandum concerning the forthcoming tour of the phosphorus plant. I recommend that visitors be brought to the plant the night of their arrival for a look at the night shift operation. From a distance, we can show them 6 of the world's largest electric furnaces for producing phosphorus. At the same time, we can show them how we tap a furnace to remove the slag. The following morning, our guests can be brought back to see the day shift taking over. We'll move on over to the mining operation, show them how we get the raw material for phosphorus. We'll explain that the reddish-brown earth we mine contains billions of tiny skeletons of pinpoint-sized animals dead for millions of years, and that these microscopic bones have been leached by groundwater into what we call a matrix of phosphate and lime. Next, we'll look at the matrix going into the washer plant, where the heavy clay is separated from it. At the center plant, we'll just explain that out of the mixing and processing of matrix with coal, coke, and sand in white-hot crucibles, with smoke and cinders and flaming slag, we produce Spitfire phosphorus. Summing up, we'll say that this wild element makes the important phosphates that do the gentle chores in life. Phosphates to make soft drinks and sugar, to help bake the bread, to wash the clothes, to fireproof, yes, fireproof textiles, and improve engine oil, to soften water, and to make jelly. I think you'll agree that there's something a little magical about chemistry.
The minute you stop being overwhelmed by the technical side of chemistry, you discover that it's a kind of scientific supermarket in your life. There's barely a minute of your time on Earth that is not in some way made secure and comfortable through chemistry. In many ways, chemistry is the watchdog of our safety. Every time we get into an automobile, we are concerned with a highly important aspect of safety. We take it for granted that we're protected by safety glass. And we are, well protected, because the kids who were curious about crystal sets and horseshoes in the 1920s became curious about plastics in the 1940s. The plastics research men created a material called vinyl butyrol. They rolled it into thin, tough sheets and put it between two slices of glass to make safety sandwiches. Then they put the sandwiches in an autoclave to clarify the plastic and seal the layers of glass in a permanent bond. Each time they make a new sandwich, they put it to the standard tests. First, the drop test with a steel ball weighing half a pound. The ball is taken up to 18 feet and dropped on the glass. The glass withstands the smashing and passes the same test in temperatures ranging from 0 to 120 degrees. So they give it the hammer test. And rate it according to how much plastic is exposed when they're through smashing it. That is all the proof the glass industry wants. Windshields and door glass are sliding down production lines. The new plastic is the new standard for safety glass in the automobile industry. That's why I say there's scarcely a minute of a person's life that is not in some way made safe and comfortable through chemistry. We take it for granted. We don't give it a second thought.
A good research chemist is a versatile man. Yesterday, he worked on plastics for safety glass and hydraulic fluid for airplanes. Today, he's investigating lumber. The problem? To try and get vanillin, the chemical heart of vanilla flavor, from a tree. We started that one at a modern wood pulp mill, where logs were stripped of bark under high-pressure water nozzles. The peeled logs were fed into huge chipping blades that chewed them down to uniform chips in a matter of seconds. The wood chips eventually became pulp. But the part we wanted was a byproduct called sulfite liquor, a clean, dark brown fluid that used to go down the drain as waste. We knew that this dark brew from the pulp mill contained vanillin. We spent 8 years working on that dark brown brew, and finally it paid off. We produced crystals of vanillin. That's chemistry. A tree falls for one good reason, and chemistry finds another. Something good from almost nothing.
The day the dirty clothes began piling up on the floor of the research lab, I remembered what one of my chemistry profs said about chemistry being concerned with the clothes on a man's back. I wish he could have seen our laundry. Everybody on the staff was invited to bring in their soiled linen and get it washed free of charge. We'd been looking for a new detergent, and we'd found one all right, but it wouldn't lather. Instead of labeling it a mistake, we tested it. We dirtied up thousands of cotton swatches, pop them into fruit jars, and wash them in our laundrometer. The bigger stuff we tubbed in the automatic washing machines. We put strict controls on the whole project. All the wash samples were checked with the photoelectric cell to see how white the whites really were. Our new detergent stayed up at the head of the class. Oh, after a year of this, there wasn't a doctor of philosophy in the lab who couldn't have stepped into the laundry business and made a clean success. We whipped up a small ocean of soap suds, and the evidence showed that a lot of suds in an automatic washing machine does not necessarily guarantee the best wash job. Large quantities of suds only cushion the clothes against a thorough cleansing action. But once we knew that, we decided to give our new product the all-out treatment. We called for another mountain of dirty clothes for the laundry with a big overhead and no revenue. For another 6 months, there were 5 Mondays in every week. No buttons replaced. No ironing done on the premises. We guarantee only that all clothes will be washed in a new way and handed back whiter than the customer's ever seen them. Hours or 9 to 5. At the end of the line, 18 months from the beginning, we had our almost sudsless detergent ready. We called it Sterox. And I think it proves that chemistry is concerned with a good many aspects of man's daily struggle, right down to the clean shirt on his back.
It was a silkworm that gave Professor Robert Hooke his big idea. Way back in the 17th century, he predicted that man might find a way to beat the silkworm at his own game. Man did find a way to beat the silkworm, not in making silk, but certainly in creating fibers. It's really very simple.
You start with a partial oxidation of methane to acetylene, CH4 to C2H2. Thermodynamically, you'd expect CO2 and water when CH4 is reacted with pure O2, but in this controlled reaction, you get C2H2 and CO and hydrogen, actually creating triple bonds between the carbon atoms. Then with the HCN from ammonia, the two gases link up in the reactors over a catalyst.
Get it? Eventually, we created a liquid called acrylonitrile. But that's only half the story. Some 14 more steps are involved before acrylonitrile becomes something to wear. Liquid acrylonitrile becomes an artificial glutinous composition, spin dope. The dope is forced through a spinneret and on into a chemical solution where the strands congeal. The wet white ropes of acrylan fiber are dried as they move out of the coagulation bath and pass under and over a series of rollers. The moist flat bands of fiber are now cut, and after further drying, the fluffing process begins. The material is then baled for shipping to the textile industry, which has joined forces with the chemical industry and is testing and weaving the new fiber. Acrylonitrile, a chemical, leads to acrylan, a fiber, and the fiber leads to fabrics worn everywhere by Americans who take for granted the textile and chemical ingenuity which created them.
After 30 years of science reporting, I can't get too excited about a press conference. But this one had a special ring to it that attracted all the first-string writers in the field. The invitation promised us a preview of a basic new discovery in home gardening and agriculture. After coffee, everybody settled down, and the chemists put in an official appearance. There certainly weren't any props on stage to remind anybody of chemistry. I spotted a few lab dishes, some old glassware, a cake beater, and some samples of dirt. Then we heard the story. A lot of you know the story by now. The chemists took the wraps off a new compound they called Kryllium soil conditioner. They said it was their first success in bringing worn-out dirt back to good soil structure.
They passed around some samples of their Kryllium soil conditioner, along with some little jars of what they called the meanest clay soil they could find, and enough water to make a mud pie out of each jar. They asked us to roll our own and see for ourselves how Kryllium worked. For the next few minutes, we had a farm bureau running in the middle of the city. We all went back to the soil and learned something. They showed us a light, powdery material. They said that when this powder is mixed thoroughly into soil that has been broken down into loose particles, the soil will retain this desirable structure. They told us about some encouraging results when they used the compound on heavy clay soils that get brick hard in summer and turn to glue in the rainy season. I put my oar in and gave it a try. It worked for us, and it worked for the fellows in the lab coats. Kryllium made it possible to convert mud into little crumbles, the kind of soil structure nature intended, because it allows plants to drink, breathe, and take nourishment, and thus grow at their maximum rate. The soil sample that wasn't treated with Kryllium was plain, unmanageable mud. Finally, our host showed us some plants grown in treated and untreated soil and let us draw our own conclusions. They apologized for not being able to bring the whole greenhouse indoors, but the plants they showed us had obviously developed healthier roots in conditioned soil. And that was the modest way they told their story. No claims that they were going to make the desert bloom overnight. They stuck to the minimum facts. The minute I had the facts in my teeth, my thoughts switched over to the men behind them. I thought about some of the great things that the chemists had delivered in the few short years since the First World War. The life-saving antibiotics, the huge family of plastics, synthetic rubber, synthetic fibers. I found myself wishing I could be on hand to write the stories about the better things to come. But I had a question. Where would chemistry find the technical manpower to crack the bigger tasks ahead?
Here is the technical manpower to crack the bigger tasks. Here they are, the dreamers, planners, and managers of a greater era of chemistry than ours. They're busy with other things right now. They're busy being young, chasing tadpoles. They're testing their inherited freedom to explore, to measure the world about them. Curiosity, alertness of mind, and a sense of adventure are their qualifications for the job. These are the ones who will take over the unfinished crusades of today's scientists. These boys may be asked to cancel cancer, beat the common cold, conquer heart disease, harness atomic energy for peace. They will inherit the chemical industry's role of service to all humanity through industries that serve humanity. Industries we know today and others we've never heard of because they haven't yet been born. They will be created by today's boy and tomorrow's man when he makes a decision for chemistry.
It's a tough business, tough on trucks and men and tempers. and it's terrific. Our most flexible transport. It's the trucking business, trading dollars for distance and delivery. You move the stuff that makes America go, a big vital factor in the business of building and producing. You buy distance with dollars and deliver at a profit. That's the deal whether you carry cattle to market, steel cross-country, or parcels cross-town. But delivery, fast, efficient, on schedule, takes dough, plenty of dough. And profit? You've got to stretch the dollars that buy the distance if you're going to make delivery pay off better. And 1,000 factors, from business conditions to busy drivers, from competition to curbstones, everyone attacks your profit, day in, day out. But there's a sound counterattack. For every trucker in the battle to beat the advancing costs of truck operation can combat today's high cost of producing profit with tires, the investment that carries the payload. You can cushion the profit squeeze of advancing fixed cost in every other phase of the hauling operation with General's 1-2 punch. More original tire miles, more recap miles. General's dynamic double economy. Here's proof, straight from the simple facts of truck operations today. Every truck, every day, every trip, 5 major costs take their cut from your revenue. Each one holds a first mortgage on every dollar of operating income, with wages claiming the biggest cut from every payload. Gasoline and oil pump off a healthy segment, a second fixed drain on every tariff dollar. Upkeep, depreciation, and overhead. These bite off another fixed share, the third segment of constant drain on your potential profit. Taxes and heavy insurance take an increasing toll of operating income. And tires do wear smooth. What's left of that payload is profit. And that's a fair picture of every hauler's operation. 5 basic hauling costs absorb a major share of the revenue dollars you trade for distance in the increasingly costly bid for trucking profit. Wages, fuel, maintenance, taxes. These costs are largely fixed by conditions beyond your control. But tire costs can be flexible costs. You can control your tire investment in mileage with General's cost-reducing 1-2 punch, more original miles built in, more recap miles built on. General's dynamic double economies that shrink mileage costs and build up trucking profits. Your single cost foundation for this double mileage economy is the quality carcass that outrides recap after recap to stretch the distance and the profit delivered by every General tire. This is it, the extra mileage foundation engineered by General for each specific hauling job. The tougher cord body that can take it longer. The General cord body that can take it safer. This then is your basic tire investment. The cord body that can deliver more high-speed, heavy-duty original service and give an extra mileage lifetime of multiple recaps. Your dynamic double in tire economy starts here, and you can measure the additional strength built into every General. More cords per inch, per ply in the carcass. Many more cords per inch than in common construction. It adds up to 4,800 extra cords per carcass in the 10-120, with other sizes in proportion. A positive, measurable increase in the strength of the General cord body. Call it tire science or call it simple arithmetic. Thousands of extra carcass cords, anchored bead to bead, produce the extra wearing power that takes more recaps per carcass. Thick squeegees of resilient rubber between all the plies smooth away heat-producing inner friction and cushions the shock of road impacts. The result is shock absorber engineering that spreads any impact over the whole tire load with the pole vaulter's cushioned resistance to shock. He spreads every impact through the muscles of legs, back, and body, a shock absorber action. The same type of shock absorber action that proves General's superior inner strength. Remove the normal protection of tread rubber and sidewalls, and the bonded cord body demonstrates its resilient resistance. Shock absorber construction transmits and dissipates every shock, every flexing under load throughout the whole structure of the tire. Add General quality tread rubber to the strongest truck tire carcass, and you complete the team of inner strength and surface toughness that gives the General truck tire its dynamic double value. You'll put more money in the profit account when you mount your truck on the most durable tire, the General tire that gives you more safe distance for every tire dollar. The modern improvement of tires for trucks has paced the growth of the trucking industry. But today's new demand for more efficient mileage is disclosing the true differences between even the best of modern tires. And profits are being made or lost on the basis of those differences. And to produce that profit difference, General puts top mileage and safety performance ahead of every other consideration in the design and construction of treads, as fine as the General cord body. This is the place where better tread rubber compounding and General engineered tread design deliver more payload miles at an extra profit. Tough going on the open road, when the chips are down on detours, when emergency calls for a dig-in stop, when the going's normal, town or country, the built-in resistance to abrasion of the General tire tread matches the stand-up durability of the strongest cord body in the business. With extra strength in the body, extra toughness in the tread, every General tire for trucks is engineered to produce the dynamic double values of more original miles, more recap miles on every hauling job. You pay dollars for distance in the trucking business. You get more distance for your dollar with new General tires. You boost profit with the tires that roll out more original miles. But tires do wear smooth, and that means less profit. But you can reduce this loss and protect your profit with a quality carcass that is built to give you more miles for your money, and with craft system recapping that renews full performance value and gives you repeated mileage dividends. From coast to coast, this license is a pledge that recapping workmanship, methods, equipment, and rubber are true General tire values. Identical craft system service. Identical value, California or Maine, Minnesota to Texas. The essence of the craft system of recapping is simply quality control. And quality insurance starts with thorough inspection. Is the tire, regardless of make, acceptable for recapping? If not, no recap. That's final. What's more, it's honest. And no truck operator ever has, ever will spend a dime with us on any make of tire that won't pay out as a recap. Your tire is buffed to balanced contour, buffed and surface scarfed for grip adhesion of cement and camelback. Your tire is pre-balanced to guide the application of the new tread rubber. Tough rubber cement, pre-dried, ensures strong initial bonding of the camelback. Finest quality camelback and repair materials are the foundation stones of the craft system. The system controls quality of workmanship and recapping method. But the quality of materials is controlled by General at the source. For the same accurate rubber chemistry and rubber compounding experience go into every ounce of tread rubber, every new tire tread, every recap. Craft system extra recap mileage results from the identical quality factors that produce more original tire mileage in the brand new General. Every recap is cured to quality standard by precision control of curing time and temperature. For this is craft system recapping. And the end of the job is a reconditioned tire with its basic service values renewed to new tire level. In every craft system shop, factory-approved equipment teams with factory-trained technicians to produce each craft system quality recap. Once again, the tire is balanced after coming from the mold, eliminating the use of excessive weight and the possibility of thumping or fast tread wear. The Kraft label, sign of quality recapping, shows where to place the valve stem. Repeated checks establish quality standards. Test for tread depth, on the nose by factory specification. A test for tread hardness confirms curing quality. A measure of extra recap miles. Kraft system means what quality means, that something extra in service. This badge of quality-controlled recapping service marks the tire that's ready for extensive extra mileage before its next date for a Kraft recap. More miles per recap and extra recaps per carcass. Kraft system recapping adds the premium performance that controls and cuts tire mileage costs and increases hauling profits. So you men of the trucking industry are the nation's circulation system. You move cattle to market, steaks to the home. You shear off the mountains and open the earth to deliver the basic materials of which industry is made. You highball the freight, you haul the logs, you deliver the makings and the necessities for all the millions of American homes. Yes, tens of millions depend upon you for bread, for clothing, for books. All the things that go to make a day of living in this wonderful world which enterprise with freedom has made. Yes, the trucking business is a great business. And why are you in it? For profit. To get more of what you work for, get General's Dynamic Double. Put the 1-2 punch for extra hauling profits to work for you. Get more original miles, more recap miles, with the tire's best engineer to do your trucking job.
This is Pontiac. Looking at it this way, Pontiac might seem to be just a lifeless sort of thing, a cold corporate being. But Pontiac is much more than the mere implements of manufacture. It's a human thing, a vital, spirited organization of men. Men working together to build quality and integrity and character into Pontiac cars. And men working together to sell Pontiac cars in more than 4,000 dealerships. Yes, it's men like these, men of Pontiac, who have helped so much to achieve the company's great record over the years. For Pontiac's long, rich experience goes even deeper into the past than most people know. In 1907, the Pontiac buggy became the Oakland car, named after the county in which it was built. And 2 years later, the company joined forces with General Motors. From then on, progress was fast. In the year 1926 came the first car to bear the great name Pontiac. And here, right at the very start, Pontiac established its unique strategic market position with a quality car built to satisfy all those who want something better than just the very lowest priced. Pontiac pioneered in progress by originating scores of major product improvements because it provides a lot of extra value for only a little more investment. Pontiac has consistently been able to sell more cars than it could produce. To keep pace with this tremendous demand, Pontiac's ultra-modern plant facilities have been expanded until they have become a veritable city in themselves. But this great city within a city simply could not exist without the help of this man. A man who does his work out on the far horizon of Pontiac endeavor. The final important link between Pontiac and the public it serves. This is David Strong. Looking at David, you wouldn't be aware of anything very unusual. He's just an everyday, steadfast sort of guy, a nice guy. And if you were to check up on him, you'd find him listed in the pages of the city directory as, here it is, Strong David, SLSMN, 1327 Maple. How little those letters tell. For the people Dave works for and the people who make the product that Dave sells know him for his full stature and worth. They know him as David, husband of Ellen and father of 3 other responsible citizens, each one very important to the others. They know what it is he works for. For Dave Strong is a successful man. He's a member of a good profession. The profession of giving indispensable help to his neighbors in his community. The profession of selling. And he finds in his work all the pride of accomplishment and the honest respect that are so important to any man. His income is substantial and it's steady. His future is secure. Dave Strong is a Pontiac salesman. In fact, the man for whom Dave works was and still is a Pontiac salesman. But you must understand, Dave is a lot more than a guy with a glad hand, a gift of gab, and a shoe shine. He isn't out on that floor on his own. He's a representative of all the people in the dealership. And they depend on him to know the right thing to say and the right time to say it. For selling is not instinctive. Just about everything Dave Strong knows had to be learned. And now all he has learned, along with the know-how of thousands of other salesmen, has been gathered together to help you, the men of Pontiac, reach your destination dotted line.
You know, it's been said that all you have to do to sell is to influence others to favorable action. It's as simple as that, and it's complicated. To me, selling isn't a cold, hard science. It can't all be written down and learned word for word. It's an art. For example, if you were trying to sell this prospect, you'd talk to him in a certain way. But if you were trying to sell this person, you'd convey your story in an entirely different way. Sure, for some guys it's just a job, but to me it's a permanent lifetime profession. You see, I figure that no sale is ever a good sale unless everyone involved in the deal is better off for it. I do the best I can to sell every car the right way. I don't sell just an automobile. I sell a whole package, a package of future pleasure and service, wrapped up with all the facilities and manpower of this dealership. There's real personal satisfaction and more money in that kind of selling. The idea is not to make a few isolated, disconnected sales, but to build up a permanent, continuing clientele of steady customers that'll pay off for years to come. Selling automobiles is one thing. Selling Pontiac automobiles is another. The Pontiac is different from any other car. It's easier to sell. And one big reason for this is the fact that Pontiac has the greatest public acceptance of any car in or near its price group. That makes our work simply a matter of transmitting ideas, of communicating what we learn about Pontiac to other people. So I keep saying to myself, listen, Dave, if you can get the prospect to know as much about Pontiac as you do, he'll never buy any other car. Another thing, look at the growing passenger car market. For years, the trend has been generally upward, and in proportion, Pontiac sales over these same years have gone even more sharply upward. Project these sales lines into the future, and we see increasing opportunity for you and for me for years to come. Opportunity unlimited. And you know, one reason the profession of selling Pontiacs is such a great opportunity is that you have so many facilities furnished without having to invest a penny of your own. I'm in business for myself here, but I don't have to pay any of the cost, no rent or upkeep. I've got skilled people to help me, but I don't have to meet the payroll. My merchandise is bought and stocked for me, but I don't have to lay out a dime. I've got millions of dollars worth of advertising and publicity to help me in my work, and it doesn't cost me anything. I've got financing facilities available to make it easier for my customers to pay, but I don't have to loan anybody anything. A car is the average family's biggest purchase, you know, next to their home. Tremendous sums of money are spent for me every year in research and product improvement, just so I'll have better cars that are easier to sell year after year, with features that appeal to all types of buyers. For all this, I risk exactly nothing. Then there are all the selling tools I'm furnished to work with. The finest sales tool of all, of course, is the Pontiac car itself. I know that it pays to learn every detail of my product and to demonstrate the features to all my customers. With Pontiac priced just above the lowest, we can offer luxury, quality, and performance that can't be matched by some cars priced hundreds of dollars higher. What a sales tool that is. This Pontiac sales album is my library. It has all the facts. Pontiac's low depreciation, for instance, will open the eyes of the toughest buyer. With this section of the album, the job of nullifying competitive over-allowance is easy. This device will help you satisfy any customer's personal tastes in car color and trim. This Feature Finder handbook gives you the selling features of all your used cars. Along with a good reconditioning job, this sales tool will help you move those makes that are hard to sell. Used cars are important to all of us, you know. And there are other sales tools, too. Displays, banners, window trims, and so on. All these facilities and tools are given to you. All you're asked to put up is your natural intelligence, a full, fair share of your time, and a little neatness and good taste of that important selling tool, your appearance. That completes the deal, except for just one thing. That's sales know-how. That's for you to furnish, and only you can furnish it. There's no better way to get know-how than to start out with the Pontiac Success Fundamentals and take this direct route to our destination dotted line. You're on your way, boys. Just remember, the more you help others, the more you help yourself. The very best of luck, and keep your windshield clean.
How does it go today, he asks. How does it go every day? Plenty of walk-ins, but no buyers. If this keeps up, I'm going back to the mines.
Here's your check, Ed.
Oh, thanks.
And yours, Mr. Carpenter?
Oh, thank you, Mary. How the devil is this gonna last? Just wait till Mary sees this.
Things can't be that bad, Ed.
You're a big help. I'd be plenty happy if I were making your kind of dough.
Well, I think you could be.
I wish I knew how. It isn't that I haven't tried, Jim. I just don't seem to get results. Well, take last week, for example, and again this week. I haven't made enough to feed the birds. And I know it isn't my job, because you've been knocking them off right and left.
Take it easy. I'm not that good.
That's the way things look from here.
I know it looks like luck, the breaks of the game. But think a minute. Didn't we both start here at about the same time?
Yeah?
You came in off the road, and I had just gotten out of the Army, so we both started from scratch. You even had the edge, because road selling is the toughest kind there is.
A lot of good it's done me.
You know, you remind me of a guy with $1 million in the middle of the Sahara.
Well, what do you mean?
Well, he's got money to spend, and there's nothing to buy. You're a good salesman with no one to sell to. I've seen you walk up to guys out there on the floor, size them up, and start talking to them like you'd known them all their lives. Why, you operate like you wrote that book on how to make friends and influence people.
I do.
Sure you do, but there's only one catch. You got nobody to influence.
You said it.
Where's your prospect file?
Well, here's what I've been working on.
Ed, let me show you the system I use. Maybe it'll give you some ideas.
Well, I suppose you're going to tell me that if I put all my prospects on neat little cards in a neat little box, that I'm going to start selling cars, huh?
No, it isn't the file that makes the difference. It's the way you use it.
All right, so?
Well, for instance, you mentioned going back to the mines. Learning to dig makes for a more successful salesman, because that's the way we find prospects. We dig them up. They don't fall in our lap. What do you suppose would happen at an assembly plant if the man didn't keep up the stock that feeds the line?
Well, they'd stop making cars.
Sure they would. And in a way, it's the same story with us, Ed. We have to keep up a reserve stock of potential customers, each one in various stages of preparation. And that takes digging.
Okay. But when am I going to do my actual selling?
Well, locating prospects is selling. You just have to budget your time so that you can make the best use of it. Our automobile market is big, and to cover it efficiently, you have to plan. For instance, take a small section of this area. For every 100 people in the area, only about 3 will buy new cars in an average year. The trouble is, these 3 people probably won't look or act any different from the others. You have to assume that every person you talk to is a potential prospect, or the source of a prospect. When it comes right down to it, there are really only 2 types of prospects. First, there's the walk-in. Now, floor play is okay, and we all like to pick off sales that walk in the door. But you know that walk-ins are very often just plain shoppers. You can't very well live on this source alone. You've got to go out and find the other kind of prospect. And when you do, brother, you've struck it rich. Because you've got a better chance of keeping the whole deal to yourself. One of the best prospect sources is the Pontiac owner's registration list. Pontiac owners are so sold on their cars that most of them continue to buy Pontiacs. And in addition to being live prospects themselves, they can give you other prospects. The automobile business is the only business where a salesman can get the names of all the owners of products that compete with his. I look through this list regularly, especially when the cars are 2 or 3 years old. The service department is a good place to find new car prospects, too. But I don't depend entirely on service salesmen and mechanics for leads. I go out there and talk to customers myself. Sometimes a person who thinks he can only buy a used car can really afford a new one, especially when he learns about our new car financing plan. The best way to get help in finding prospects is to set up a web of communication with a number of contact points, with spotters who will find prospects for you and save you time.
Bird dogs. I thought you were leading into that.
Certainly bird dogs. They're a recognized, successful part of the business. The idea is easy to use with a regular system like the Pontiac Prospect Bonus Plan. And I always make it a point to be sure and get the best bird dogs I can. It's a lot of competition for good ones. So when you get good ones, keep them happy. I never miss or stall in the payoff, and I always pay a good, fair fee. For other prospect sources, I belong to business clubs, and I keep active in social and civic organizations. It's just good salesmanship to meet the key people, the men that other people imitate and take advice from. So I'll have the community leaders on my side working for me. For personal promotion, no matter where I go, I make sure everybody knows I sell Pontiac cars. I don't bore them with it, but it does take judgment and tact. For instance, I make full use of General Motors' big library of movies. I arrange for showings to Rotary clubs, PTA meetings, in fact, any public gathering. Personal promotion, the everyday business of making yourself known to more and more people, is invaluable. Do you make use of our giveaway items, Ed?
Well,
I've had unusually good success with this Pontiac roadmap. Owners and prospects are really glad to get it. Here's another thing. I try to make contacts with people in finance companies and banks to find out when customers' car contracts are just about paid up. Insurance people will help, too. I've located many a pre-sold prospect by making constant calls on the employees of Pontiac fleet owners. In driver training courses, I get tips from teachers and from the kids themselves. I watch the local events like weddings, property sales, probate court news about wills and inheritances. These and other items will often give you worthwhile leads. And I get prospects by displaying a car at factories when shifts change or at lunchtime. And of course at auto shows and fairs. A few days after a customer of mine has taken delivery on a new Pontiac, I make it a point to call back and see if he's satisfied with his car, hand him the road map and ask him about his neighbors. Remember that sale I closed Monday?
Oh, yeah, the guy who bought the blue Catalina.
Well, I got that deal as a result of a call back.
When I think of the times, I've never given a closed sale a second thought.
Well, it's worth thinking about, Ed. And for good measure, I leave a full-line folder at each house in the neighborhood. Then, later, I follow up the contact with the neighbors by direct mail. I have ways of keeping posted on owners of cars that have been in minor accidents. I get tips from the police and from firemen and other civil servants. And I get the names of a lot of good prospects from tow truck operators. Then there's the good old technique of finding a likely-looking trade-in on the street or in a parking lot and leaving a carefully worded selling note, perhaps with a definite dollars and cents offer for the car. Now, cars are not sold on the telephone, but it can be used to locate prospects. I find out everything I can about a person before I call, and I avoid asking any questions that might be answered with a no. And when I get one of those no customers, one I just can't seem to close, I trade with another salesman. And you'd be surprised at the change in the customer's attitude. As a matter of fact, I've got a tough farmer right now that I can't sell. How about a trade, Ed?
Okay, it's a deal.
Good.
Here's your check, Ed.
Oh, thanks, Mary.
Throughout the length and breadth of America, in every city and town, every day in the week, is somebody's wedding day. No ceremony more deeply symbolizes every woman's hopes, nor does any so clearly point out the continuity of family and home and their place in the life of the community. Marriages in the U.S. exceed 5,000 per day, a total of over 2 million each year. All marriages have the full force of a legal contract, the full sanction of society, whether the rituals celebrating them be extravagantly formal or modestly simple, whether they are performed by a civil authority or solemnized by religious ceremonies of the participants' faith.
William, wilt thou have this woman to thy wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou love her, comfort her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, keep thee only unto her, so long as ye both shall live?
I will.
For as much as William and Anita have consented together in holy wedlock, and have witnessed the same before God and this company, and thereto have given and pledged their troth each to the other, and have declared the same by giving and receiving rings, and by joining hands, I pronounce that they are husband and wife, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.
In the happy sentimentality of the wedding day, the problems which inevitably lie ahead for every bride and groom seem remote and unimportant. But for all the careless rapture with which most newly married couples commence their lives together, the time soon comes when husband and wife have to face a multitude of disturbing realities. First among them is the housing shortage, which has existed in the United States to a greater or lesser degree for more than 20 years. Often, after weeks or even months of house hunting, newlyweds are forced either to pay rent far beyond their means or to accept living conditions so bad as to threaten seriously their chances of married happiness. And sooner or later, the realization comes to every housewife that only by the most prudent spending can she make her husband's paycheck stretch far enough to take care of the family. But of all the problems which newlyweds must face, those which most seriously threaten their union arise out of individual differences of personality. Many a marriage is undermined as well by constant and bitter disagreement over household expenditures. Such fundamental differences, best ironed out before marriage, are a constant source of friction.
We can't afford a freezer.
We can't afford a freezer. Oh, no. That would make my housework too easy. But you can afford to sit around that club of yours all week and buy drinks for your cronies.
If not guarded against, they can lead to hostility and even downright hatred. Most people will endure years of unhappiness before acknowledging that their marriage is a failure. Finally, when their marital woes seem intolerable, they seek escape through the courts. Divorce is still not easy in most states of the Union. And for the average person, it is a profoundly disturbing experience, leaving deep psychological scars. Even more damaging are its effects on children, for whom a divorce in the family may well mean a future of emotional conflict and divided loyalties. In spite of everything, divorce has been increasing. In 1900, the proportion of American divorces to marriages was below 10%. 40 years later, this percentage had doubled. But in the next 5 years alone, it had doubled again and was almost 4 times that of 1900. Marriage is no longer what it was in the old days, when the United States was a nation of farms and villages with few great urban centers. The family then was solidly founded on the father as patriarch and breadwinner, and on the mother as cook, housekeeper, and nurse of the children. Family life centered almost exclusively around the home, in which parents and children alike were working partners, each having a definite share. Whether marriages were happy or not, people made the best of them, for divorce was almost unthinkable. By and large, marriages still fare better on the farm than in the city. But in the past 75 years, the United States has speeded up and changed beyond recognition. America has grown into a great industrialized civilization in which the individual is no longer subject to the close control in manners and morals which small neighborhoods imposed. In such a civilization, the lives of most people are coming to center more and more outside the family. Lacking the deeper home ties, their way of life is geared to a new pace and a new instability. And as manners and morals have fallen victim to the speed up of modern living, American marriage too has been strongly affected by it. One of the trends of modern life, which has been cited as most disruptive of marriage, is the increasing economic independence of women. Since 1930, one U.S. woman in every 4 has been earning her own living. Strongly against careers for women is Dr. Marinia Farnham, noted physician and co-author of the bestseller, Modern Woman, The Lost Sex.
Catastrophic social forces have propelled American women away from femininity and into careers at terrific cost to themselves and society. Abandoning their feminine role has made women unhappy because it has made them frustrated. It has made children unhappy because they do not have maternal love, and it has made their husbands unhappy because they do not have real women as partners. Instead, their wives have become their rivals. This tragic situation is increasing our divorce rate.
Today, groups like the National Council on Family Relations regard as one of the major social problems of the day the almost uninterrupted increase in the nation's divorce rate. For some surveys indicate that soon one marriage in every two may end in the divorce courts. Stoutly upholding conservative views on divorce are the nation's churches. Their leaders have never failed to take a strong moral stand on the problem. Though all churches have always disapproved of divorce in principle, many of them have come to a reluctant acceptance of it in certain circumstances. But the Roman Catholic Church steadfastly holds that a valid marriage can never be dissolved.
I think you understand, John, and you, Anne, the seriousness of the step you are about to take. You must always remember that marriage is a contract established by God himself, a contract raised by Jesus Christ to the dignity of a sacrament. Therefore, this marriage, once validly entered into, can never be broken except by death. What God hath joined together, let no man put asunder.
Among American young people, the entire organization of social life and the full force of custom support the tradition that romantic love is the one acceptable basis for marriage. American boys and girls have been conditioned to expect that they will, sooner or later, meet their sentimental ideal, the one and only, with whom, automatically, life can be lived happily ever after. But more and more, the realization is growing among young people that physical attraction in itself is not a sufficiently solid basis for marriage. Of the world's population, a fair share lives under cultural systems in which marriages are customarily arranged by parents who endeavor to find matches for their children on suitable social and economic terms. Transplanted to America, and particularly to those areas with large population groups of European or Asiatic origins, is the institution of the marriage broker. But though for a minority the arranged marriage proves to be successful, Americans in general prefer their own traditional way, whatever the risk of mistakes. To help reduce the number of unsuccessful marriages, there has come into being another new American profession, that of marriage counselor. Today there are many accredited counselors with varying professional backgrounds who can help couples seek a firm foundation for married life. Through the family physician, too, professional counsel is always available, not only for those planning to get married, but also for those long wed who find themselves in marital difficulties. To people in trouble, the doctor's advice may offer a sovereign remedy for marriage maladjustments, since the family physician has often known his patient's personal problems since their cradle days. But for all the wisdom and experience advice available, most Americans will rely upon their own common sense, cooperativeness, and forbearance to carry them through the pitfalls which beset married life. And despite these pitfalls, marriage is a richly rewarding experience which pays big dividends in happiness and contentment. In the establishment of a home, in planning and building together for the future, husband and wife can find joint opportunity for creative accomplishment. In performing even the simplest household tasks, each can enjoy the ever-present companionship of the other. But of all the experiences they can share, of all the things they can achieve together, none can give them greater satisfaction than the founding of a family, which society has always recognized as the primary purpose of marriage. Nearly 4 million babies are born in the United States each year. For raising a family, expense and trouble notwithstanding, holds out today, as it always has, a greater promise of self-realization than any other course in life. The young mother watching her child grow can take pride in the knowledge that it is largely through her effort and her care that his health and well-being are maintained. The father, realizing that his family depends upon him for every necessity of life, and that their future, as well as his own, is at stake, finds that the responsibilities he has assumed give him a greater incentive to seek advancement. Despite all the demands the support of a wife and children make upon him, despite all the extra worries it entails, the family man has been found to be more stable emotionally than the bachelor, less likely to crack up under psychological stresses. For as a husband and father, he is apt to feel far more secure in the affections of those who mean most to him. Not only are the married more stable emotionally, but in addition, they tend to achieve a greater degree of financial security, to be more prudent in the use of the money they make, and more intent on saving. Those who can achieve a happy married life can look back upon burdens shared, plans made in common, triumphs in which each had a part. They will have learned that a marriage can be successful only when both partners approach it creatively, intelligently, and with the will to make it work.